Hello friends and greetings for the day. Welcome back to another tutorial on ISTQB Foundation level sample paper discussions where we are talking about the tips, tricks and time management related to this examination. As a part of this particular tutorial, we are stepping into the chapter 3 of set D and shall be looking forward to have the discussion on the questions from this chapter. And without wasting much of our time, let's get started. The very first question we have for you is number 15, which says, which of the following cannot be examined by static testing? I think we need to keep it pretty straightforward at this point of time. When it comes to static testing, of course, all we have one statement to say that almost every single type of written documentation is having the capability of getting reviewed. That means as far as humans are able to read that, they can verify it, they can review it, and they can conduct static testing on that. Whereas static testing is of two types, that is review and static analysis. So where humans are not capable of reading it, you can obviously go ahead and do the static analysis with help of tools, which are mainly used for codes. And that is where we say that to a certain extent these are possible. So when it comes to certain specific things like the third-party codes or the information which is written in a language that neither the human nor the tool can understand, that's only the thing which we do not review or which we do not statically analyze. So yes, there are certain things which we do consider as an account that this cannot be reviewed by us. So let's get it started, and we have some quick options given to us. The options here say A, contract, B, test plan, C, encrypted code, and D, test charter. I think this is pretty straightforward. When we talk about contracts, they are written in English languages. When we talk about test plan, that is also written and it can be easily understood and readable by humans. And test charter is also readable by humans. But when we talk about encrypted code, because they're not just saying code, because if it was just code, we could pretty much do static analysis and yes, static testing can be conducted. But if it is written as encrypted code and that is encrypted in a way that certainly a tool cannot be able to penetrate into that, right? So most of the tools are incapable of reviewing or analyzing the encrypted code, and which makes it clear to us that the right answer for this particular question is C, that is encrypted code is one of these listed items which cannot be examined by static testing. So that's how we should be able to recall and remember what is that we cannot review and what is that we can review, what are the different types of it. Let's move on to the next question. The next question we have for you is question number 16. It says, which of the following statement about the value of testing is correct? So no context given to us. Let's start reading the options. Option A says the defect types found by static testing are different from the defect types found by dynamic testing. Looks pretty much correct because that's what we have been learning about in the entire discussion, that yes, some defect types is always possible that static testing can find, such as unreachable code, design patterns, or things which are not yet implemented, or even if we talk about the defects which are related to design, traceability, etc. Whereas dynamic testing are mainly to identify things which are not so relevant with respect to that of static, right? For example, dynamic testing finds more of the functional failures and results into a root cause analysis to detect what could be the implementation which could have gone wrong with writing a code, or basically the errors in the code. But static testing is mainly to identify the defects which are related to static issues like design, code requirements, design patterns, or even traceabilities and other security vulnerabilities, etc. So if I look at this statement once again, it says that the defect types found by the static testing are different from defect types that can be found by dynamic testing. Looks absolutely right, but let's cross check with option B and C and D. B says dynamic testing can detect the defect types that can be found by static testing plus some additional defect types. We cannot make that statement. The reason is, of course, the dynamic testing has defect base, like they conduct failures and then look forward to dynamic failures, which happens when we run the application. But static testing has a completely different base. So it's not that we can make a statement that dynamic testing can find those defects which static can find plus some additional ones, right? So that's not a valid statement to talk about. Option C says Dynamic testing can identify some of the defects that can be found by static testing, but not all of them. In fact, this statement also looks pretty much valid because yes, some of the static related defects can be found by dynamic testing. For example, anomalies in the code, like by doing unit testing. So if we are talking about a particular level like unit testing, I'm just directly interacting with the program by executing it, and I may result into direct identification of wrong declaration of variables or variables which probably have been declared but never used, because that could be one of the thing. And if I talk about infinite loop, that's another good example to talk about. Infinite loop, I can come to know right from the UI as well, or executing a simple program, that I'm getting stuck at this point of time in the code and I'm not able to proceed ahead. So yes, I would like to say that dynamic testing can result into identification of some of the static defects, but not all of them. And if I look at option D, it says static testing can identify the defects that can be found by dynamic testing as well as some extra defects. This is completely invalid because static testing is non-executable and cannot find any of the dynamic defects. However, dynamic testing can find some of these static. So D becomes a little, contradicting to the definitions of static and dynamic defects. Now we have two options to contradict with, that is option A and option C. Let's quickly read the option A once again so that we can be very clear. Option A says the defect types found by static testing are different from the defects type that can be found by dynamic testing. Seems like a little confusing element because I don't find any problem here, because even if I see from different angles, different concerns, static testing certainly gives me a different set of defect. Like it is a direct defect identification method, finds defects statically without execution, and results into identification of different defects which are related to documentation, anomalies, which human mistakes are there, and several other things. Whereas on the other side, dynamic testings certainly finds the dynamic failures, which basically result into the execution based outcomes. So it's not that they are same. Of course they are different. So it's very contradicting to define between the options A and C. C is also pretty much right that dynamic testing can identify some of the defects that can be found by static testing, and that makes pretty much a lot of sense. But when we talk about some defects type that can only be detected by dynamic testing, such as performance issues or memory issues that can only be observed when executing the code. So I'm not sure if they have done anything wrong with this particular question, because I feel the option A and C both should be right. But as per the guide, they have written C as the right answer. So I don't have any opinion. So I would leave it to you to finally conclude on that, and probably drop down a comment to let me know what do you think about that, why option A or option C, which one should be the most relevant answer. But I feel this is a conflicting answer because they have different defects in context. Let's move on to the next question. The next question we have is question number 17. And number 17 says, given the following description of review activities, so some of the events are listed here. In short, detecting anomalies are deliberated upon the determination. So that means, in simple words, detecting anomalies. Then second activity is issues are recorded. Then reviewers employ techniques to come up with suggestions. Fourth, the objective of the review and its schedule are established. And finally, the participants are provided with access to item being reviewed. So which of the following is the correct sequence in the review process of the activities that correspond to descriptions? So we just have to recall the formal review process, and there we have discussed that the major phases are planning, then review initiation, then individual preparation, and then we have the communication and analysis, as well as the last phase is the fixing and reporting. So we know what are the major activities that take place here, and all we have to do is orient them in the right order. So of course, in this particular list of activities, the first item should be always the objective of the review and its schedule are established, which is number 4. Then after that, once the planning or schedule and other things are set up, the participants are distributed, which is review initiation phase. Participants are distributed with the documentation to go through. Then after that, we should have reviewers will use their techniques to come up with their suggestion, potential findings, and documenting the defects what they have. which is basically from the preparation point of view. And then we should detect the anomalies, which are anomalies are deliberated upon and determinations are reached regarding their status, which is a part of the communication and analysis, and also ownership and any further steps needed, which are performed and defined here. And finally, issues are recorded, which are captured as a part of matrices and other things. And then any needed updates are addressed prior to accepting the work product. So rework, fixing is what happening in the last stage. So that's how we can have some tricky statements at times, which would make our job a little complex, but sometimes keeping it with the understanding very clear, we can come to the conclusion very easily. But given that you know the process, so understanding, recalling, learning would all help you to come to this conclusion quickly. So put together, the right answer for this particular question is B, that is, it goes to 4, then goes to 5, then goes to 3, then goes to 1, and then goes to 2 is the right sequence of performing a formal review process based on the sequences of actions defined as per the formal review. Let's move on to the next question. And the next question we have for you is question number 18. And the question number 18 is saying that which participant in the review process is responsible for ensuring that the review meeting run effectively and that everyone at the meeting can voice their opinion freely. See, this is a little tricky but yet straightforward, I would say, because some of these standard roles have been described to us. We know that some of these standard roles, not all the standard roles, I would say rather, manager, moderator, reviewer, scribe, review leader, all are the author are the standard 6 roles, and we have a very defined responsibilities for them. That the manager defines the schedule, allocates the budget, moderator makes sure that the review meetings are running efficiently when held, right? So that's the point what they're asking you. And review leaders basically take the overall responsibility of the review, also decide on where and when it will take place. Authors are the people who have written the document and responsible for fixing the defects, and same way the reviewers are one who are responsible to review the given document and list down the findings, and scribe is someone who will be only responsible to document the review report. So I think that makes our job very straightforward and simple. Let's look at the option are A, manager, B, moderator, C, chairperson, D, review leader. In this, if you see, C is not at all a standard role, and manager is not someone who is making sure that people can talk freely, and again, review leader is not having that responsibility. So put together, the right answer for this particular question is B, moderator. As per the standard syllabus and content, it clearly says that moderator is the person who's responsible to moderate the meeting effectively, that the meeting runs effectively when held. So moderator takes care of that. So these are the questions what we will be expecting from the chapter 3, and we finally have covered from the set D as well. The next tutorial we shall be looking forward to the next chapter, that is 4, and would be talking about the test techniques. So that's all from this particular tutorial team. Should you have anything else, feel free to comment below. I'm always there to address your queries and answer them well. Till then, keep learning, keep exploring, keep understanding the context. Thanks for watching the video, team, and happy learning.